Honey, you're working late again? Grace asked, leaning against the doorway of the study, her tone light but probing. Raymond looked up from his laptop, the blue light reflecting in his tired eyes. Yeah, Grace, these deadlines aren't going to meet themselves. You know how it is? Grace stepped closer, her soft slippers barely making a sound against the hardwood floor. You're always working so hard for us. I don't know how you do it, she said, resting a hand on his shoulder before kissing his forehead. Raymond leaned back slightly, giving her a warm smile. It's for the family. For you and the kids. It's worth it. We're so lucky to have you, she replied, her voice dripping with affection. Her eyes flicked to his screen for a moment before she walked away, her phone still clutched in her hand. Raymond returned his focus to the presentation, satisfied that everything in his world was as it should be. But Grace's words, the way she lingered in the doorway longer than usual, didn't quite sit right with him. He brushed the thought aside, chalking it up to his exhaustion. Later that evening, the house was quiet. The kids were in their rooms, the muffled sounds of video games and late-night chatter spilling faintly into the hallway. Raymond, still at his desk, rubbed his temples and leaned back in his chair. The strain of the day weighed heavily on him, but he felt accomplished, another step closer to securing the promotion he'd been working toward for months. As he closed his laptop and stretched, his eyes drifted to the kitchen. Grace's phone was vibrating incessantly on the counter, buzzing against the granite like an insect trying to escape. Normally, he would ignore it, respecting her space. But tonight, something was different. The frequency of the notifications felt off, urgent, desperate even. Curiosity tugged at him. It's probably nothing, he muttered to himself, standing up and walking toward the kitchen. But his feet moved of their own accord, driven by a gnawing sense of unease. He picked up the phone, noting the screen lit up with the name M. The latest message preview read, "Can't wait to hold you again. Let me know when he's asleep." Raymond's chest tightened. His thumb hovered over the screen, a part of him screaming to put the phone down and walk away. But the other part, the one that needed to know the truth, pushed forward. He unlocked the phone using the passcode he'd known for years, the date of their wedding. The message thread unfolded before him, each line a hammer blow to his chest. "I can't wait to see you tonight, my love. Does he suspect anything? Last night was incredible. You're worth every risk." Raymond's hands shook as he scrolled through the messages, the casual intimacy between Grace and M slicing through him like a blade. His breathing grew ragged, and his vision blurred. The kitchen, once a warm and familiar space, now felt cold and foreign. Footsteps sounded from the hallway. Grace appeared, her hair tied back and a mug of tea in her hands. "Raymond, what are you doing?" she asked, her tone a mix of surprise and caution. He turned to her slowly, holding up the phone. "Care to explain this?" Her eyes widened for a split second before she composed herself. "That's private. You had no right to look at my phone." "No right," he repeated, his voice rising. "I'm your husband. Who the hell is him?" Grace set the mug down on the counter, her hands trembling. "It's not what you think," she began, but Raymond cut her off. "Not what I think. These messages don't lie, Grace. Last night was incredible. Does he suspect anything? How long has this been going on?" Her mouth opened and closed, searching for words. Finally, she settled on defiance. "You're overreacting. You've been so busy with work, so distant. I needed someone to talk to." "Talk?" Raymond scoffed, his voice dripping with bitterness. "This doesn't look like talking. This looks like betrayal." Grace's face hardened. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of your job, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Raymond's jaw tightened. Her words hit like a slap, but they didn't diminish the betrayal he felt. "Don't you dare try to blame this on me. I've done everything for you, for this family. And this is how you repay me?" She crossed her arms, her eyes avoiding his. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Raymond repeated, his voice rising again. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. That's not complicated, Grace. That's disgusting." The room fell into a tense silence, the air thick with anger and hurt. Grace's phone buzzed again, the sound cutting through the quiet like a knife. Raymond glanced at it, his anger reigniting. You're still texting him? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Grace reached for the phone, but Raymond pulled it away. We're not done here, he said firmly. Who is he? And don't you dare lie to me again. She hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. It's Martin, she admitted quietly. From work, Raymond felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Martin, a man he'd met at office parties, someone he'd considered an acquaintance, if not a friend. The betrayal cut even deeper. How long? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace looked away. A few months? Raymond nodded slowly, his mind racing. He set the phone down on the counter and walked past her without another word. Raymond, wait, she started, but he held up a hand to silence her. I need to think, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He climbed the stairs to their bedroom, shutting the door firmly behind him. Alone in the silence, he sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. The weight of the betrayal threatened to crush him. But even in the midst of his despair, a new feeling began to take root, resolve. Raymond knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Raymond's world felt like it was spinning off its axis. He had barely slept, plagued by thoughts of Grace's betrayal. Her excuses, her defiance, and her ultimate admission played on a loop in his mind. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cold cup of coffee, his gaze fixed on the backyard where their kids played. They were laughing, blissfully unaware that their family was fracturing beneath the surface. Grace had tried to talk to him before she left for work, but he had shut her down with a curt, "Not now." He couldn't face her, not until he had more answers. Words alone weren't enough. He needed proof, undeniable evidence that would confirm the extent of her betrayal. Later that day, as Grace went to the office and the kids were at school, Raymond began his search. She had always been meticulous about keeping her belongings organized, almost obsessively so. The thought struck him. Grace had a habit of writing things down, whether it was to-do lists, plans, or her thoughts. If there was a record of her affair, it would be somewhere in the house. He started in their shared home office, carefully opening drawers and sorting through files. His fingers brushed past old receipts, bills, and meaningless paperwork. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He was about to give up when his gaze landed on the bookshelf. Grace had always taken great pride in her collection of novels and journals. She kept them in pristine condition, and the shelf was arranged by genre, then by author's last name. It was the one space she never let anyone else organize. Something about it now seemed too perfect. Raymond knelt down and began tapping on the back panels of the shelf, remembering a documentary he'd watched about hidden compartments. To his surprise, one of the panels gave a soft click and popped open slightly. His heart pounded as he slid the panel aside, revealing a narrow compartment stuffed with papers and a small, leather-bound notebook. It was Grace's diary. Raymond hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Part of him wanted to slam the panel shut and pretend he hadn't found anything, but the gnawing need for answers overpowered his reluctance. He picked up the diary, his hands trembling as he opened it to the first page. The entry started innocently enough, musings about their kids, her career, their life together. But as he flipped further, the tone shifted. He read phrases like "felt alive again" and "our secret meetings make my heart race." The words blurred together as his eyes skimmed the pages. Then he found it, the entry that shattered his world. "My love, all 5 kids are yours. The dummy even paid for their expensive boarding schools. I can't believe how easy it was to fool him. He's too blind and love-struck to ever suspect." Raymond's breath caught in his throat. His grip tightened on the book as he reread the words, hoping he had misunderstood. But the cruel clarity of the sentence was inescapable. His knees felt weak, and he stumbled back, collapsing into the office chair. The room spun around him as the betrayal sank in. Not just an affair, a full-blown conspiracy. She had lied about the very foundation of their family. He flipped the pages feverishly, searching for more, his rage and heartbreak building with each entry. Grace had documented everything. Her meetings with Martin, the deception she wove around Raymond, even her smug satisfaction at getting away with it. "I have to admit, he makes it so easy. He trusts me completely, even when I leave the house late at night. I don't even have to lie anymore. He doesn't ask questions. Raymond slammed the diary shut, his chest heaving. He felt like a fool, a puppet in a cruel game where everyone but him had known the script. But alongside the pain, something else began to surface. Anger. White-hot, searing anger that burned away the numbness. That evening, Raymond sat at the dinner table with Grace and the kids. He hadn't mentioned the diary or confronted her further. Instead, he observed her, noting every word, every expression. She seemed relaxed, even cheerful, chatting with the kids about their day. "How was work, Dad?" their eldest Riley asked, breaking his trance. "Busy," he replied, forcing a smile. "But productive." Grace shot him a glance, her eyes wary. "You seemed a bit off this morning. Everything okay?" Raymond met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Just tired. Nothing to worry about." Her smile was thin, forced. "Well, I made your favorite tonight, lasagna. I figured you could use a little comfort food." "Thanks, Grace," he said, his tone neutral. "It's always nice to come home to a warm meal." The words tasted bitter in his mouth, but he kept his composure. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing how deeply she had hurt him. Not yet. After dinner, Raymond volunteered to clean up, letting Grace tuck the kids into bed. As he scrubbed the dishes, he replayed the diary entry in his mind. The venom in her words was unlike anything he had ever imagined from the woman he had loved for over a decade. His mind raced with plans, scenarios for how to confront her, how to unravel the web of lies she had spun. Once the house was quiet, Raymond returned to the office and opened the diary again. This time, he read it more carefully, taking photos of key entries with his phone. He noted dates, places, and even the names of people who might have known about the affair. His fury only deepened as he pieced together the timeline. One entry stood out among the rest. "Martin says he's ready to take the next step. He thinks I should leave Raymond and start fresh with him. But why would I? Raymond is the perfect cover. He pays the bills, keeps the kids in their fancy schools, and never suspects a thing. I have the best of both worlds, and I'm not giving it up." Raymond clenched his fists, his knuckles white. The audacity, the sheer callousness of her words was staggering. She didn't just betray him. She used him as a pawn in her twisted game. Grace entered the room suddenly, pulling him from his thoughts. "What are you doing in here?" she asked, eyeing the open diary on the desk. Raymond closed it calmly and stood up. "Just organizing some papers," he said, slipping the diary into a drawer behind him. She narrowed her eyes. "You're acting strange." "Am I?" he asked, his tone cool. "Maybe I've just had a lot on my mind." Grace hesitated, then nodded. "Well, don't stay up too late. You need your rest." Raymond watched her leave, his expression hardening. The diary was more than proof. It was his weapon. And soon, Grace would realize just how much damage she had done. As he locked the office door behind him and prepared for bed, one thought echoed in his mind. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Raymond sat in his car, parked outside a coffee shop, the leather steering wheel creaking under the pressure of his grip. The anger that had initially consumed him was now a controlled burn. His mind raced as he pieced together a plan, something that wouldn't just confront Grace, but dismantle her entire facade. He knew he couldn't do it alone. The betrayal had too many layers, and the stakes were too high. That's why he made a call that would change everything. "Mr. Harris, I don't typically ask questions, but this is quite the request." The private investigator, a gruff man named Victor Steele, leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes scanning Raymond. "You're asking me to uncover a lot. This could get messy." "I don't care how messy it gets," Raymond said firmly. "I need to know everything. Every message, every meeting, every lie. And I want proof." Victor nodded slowly. "Consider it done. Who's the target?" "Grace Harris," Raymond said, his voice tightening on her name. "And a man named Martin? I don't know his last name, but he works with her. Or used to." Victor scribbled notes, his pen moving rapidly across the notepad. "And the end goal?" "Total exposure," Raymond said, leaning forward. "I want to know where her money's hidden. I want to know how far this betrayal goes. And when I'm ready, I want her to have nowhere to hide." Victor smirked. "You're not messing around, are you? Not even a little?" The next few weeks passed in a tense haze. Raymond continued to play the role of the oblivious husband at home, Grace seemed to sense his emotional distance but chalked it up to work stress. "You've been so quiet lately," she said one night over dinner, her tone laced with false concern. "Just a lot on my plate," Raymond replied, giving her a thin smile. "Deadlines don't stop." Grace nodded, seemingly satisfied. She'd bought his excuse, which only fueled his resolve. Victor's first report arrived 2 weeks later. It was a file thick with evidence. Photos of Grace and Martin meeting at a hotel, records of her transferring money into an offshore account, and a detailed dossier on Martin himself. Raymond sat at his desk late that night, flipping through the report. Martin wasn't just any former colleague. He was a predator, a man with a history of manipulating women to climb the corporate ladder. He'd been fired from his last job for misconduct and was now running a startup, a floundering one from the looks of it. "Perfect," Raymond muttered to himself. The hardest part of his plan was securing the truth about the kids. The diary's implications haunted him, but he needed confirmation. Under the guise of a routine checkup, he scheduled a doctor's visit for each child. He submitted DNA swabs, telling himself that no matter the results, he wouldn't abandon them. When the results came back, the truth hit like a sledgehammer. None of the 5 children were biologically his. Not one. Raymond stared at the lab report, his knuckles white as he gripped the paper. The betrayal felt infinite, a chasm so deep he couldn't see the bottom. But he didn't cry, didn't scream. He simply folded the paper and slipped it into his briefcase. That evening, Grace found him in the living room, staring at a photo of their family on the mantel. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yeah," Raymond said evenly. "Just thinking about how fast time flies." Grace smiled, oblivious. "It really does. Can you believe Riley's almost ready for college?" Raymond forced a nod. "Yeah, crazy." Now that he had the evidence, Raymond began his calculated revenge. He reached out to his financial advisor, ensuring that all joint accounts were in his name only. He liquidated assets Grace didn't know about and quietly transferred the funds to a separate account. He hired a lawyer, drafting a will that ensured the kids would be cared for while cutting Grace out entirely. The piece de resistance was Grace's secret savings account. Victor had traced it to an offshore bank. Using the information Victor provided, Raymond exploited a loophole to gain access to the account. Within days, the money was gone, redirected to an anonymous account Grace would never find. By the time Raymond was finished, Grace had no idea her financial safety net had vanished. One evening, Raymond came home earlier than usual. Grace was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. "You're home early," she said, surprised. "Yeah," Raymond replied, setting his briefcase down. "Felt like taking a break from work." "That's rare," Grace joked. "Do you want to help with dinner?" "No," Raymond said, his tone sharper than intended. "We need to talk." Grace froze, her back to him. "Talk about what?" "About Martin," Raymond said coldly. She turned slowly, her face a mixture of fear and defiance. "Raymond, we've been over this. I told you it was a mistake, and it's over." Raymond pulled out a folder from his briefcase and tossed it onto the counter. "Does this look over to you?" Grace's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were photos of her and Martin at the hotel, screenshots of their messages, and a copy of her bank transfers. She flipped through the evidence, her face draining of color. Where did you get this?" she stammered. "Does it matter?" Raymond asked, crossing his arms. "You lied to me. You cheated. You stole. And now I know everything." "Raymond, please, I can explain," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I was lonely." Save it," he snapped. "I'm not interested in your excuses." Grace fell to her knees, clutching the folder. "Please, Raymond, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me." Raymond stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You should have thought about that before you destroyed our family." Raymond's final move was setting the stage for public humiliation. He coordinated with Victor to leak Martin's shady dealings to the press. Within days, Martin's startup was under investigation for fraud. Investors pulled out, and the company crumbled. Grace, still unaware of the extent of Raymond's plans, tried to salvage their marriage. She cooked his favorite meals, left him handwritten notes, and even suggested counseling. But Raymond remained distant, his focus on the endgame. The tipping point came at Christmas dinner. Raymond invited Grace's parents, Martin, and even his own father, who had unknowingly helped Grace cover up her lies. The house sparkled with Christmas cheer. Strings of lights twinkled around the windows, the fireplace crackled warmly, and the aroma of roasted turkey filled the air. Grace moved through the dining room with practiced ease, straightening the silverware and adjusting the candles. Her cheerful demeanor hid the growing unease in her chest. Raymond had been distant lately, and his quiet presence in the corner of the room only added to her anxiety. "Dinner's almost ready," Grace said brightly, glancing at Raymond as he scrolled through his phone, his face unreadable. "Great," Raymond replied without looking up. His tone was flat, but it carried weight, like a storm cloud lingering on the horizon. The guests began arriving, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Grace greeted her parents with hugs, offered drinks to Raymond's father, and made polite small talk with the rest of the family. Martin arrived last, carrying a bottle of wine and a confident smile. "Grace," Martin said warmly as he handed her the wine, his hand brushing hers for a split second too long. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," she replied, her voice a touch too high. She glanced at Raymond, who was watching them from the corner, his expression as still as stone. The dining table was a masterpiece of holiday decor, red and gold placemats, glittering ornaments as centerpieces, and Grace's best china. The conversation flowed as dishes were passed around. Laughter rippled through the room as Raymond's father told a story from his youth, and Martin chimed in with his usual charm. Grace watched Raymond carefully, hoping to gauge his mood. He was quiet, answering questions with clipped responses and sipping his wine slowly. She tried to engage him. "Raymond, remember last Christmas? The kids loved that sledding trip." Raymond's lips twitched into a brief smile. "I remember," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "That was a good day." Grace nodded, trying to hide her unease. The tension between them felt like a thread stretched too tightly, ready to snap. As the main course was finished and dessert was being served, Raymond stood, raising his glass. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. Grace's parents smiled, expecting a heartfelt toast, while Grace shifted nervously in her seat. "A toast," Raymond began, his voice steady but cold. "To family, to truth, and to finally airing out the dirty laundry." Confused murmurs spread around the table. Grace's mother looked puzzled, while Martin glanced at Grace, his confident demeanor slipping. Raymond set his glass down with deliberate precision and picked up a folder from the side table. He walked around the table and placed it in front of Martin, who stiffened in his seat. "Go ahead, Martin," Raymond said, his tone daring. "Why don't you open it? I'm sure you'll find it enlightening." Martin hesitated, his eyes darting to Grace, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. But the weight of the room's curiosity pushed him to comply. His fingers fumbled as he opened the folder and began flipping through its contents. His face paled. "What is this?" Martin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, you know exactly what it is," Raymond replied, his voice rising with controlled anger. "Photos of you and my wife sneaking around. Records of your hotel stays. Even screenshots of those sweet little text messages. Shall I read one out loud for everyone here?" The room erupted in gasps. Grace's father slammed his hand on the table. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Grace's voice wavered as she tried to intervene. "Raymond, stop. This isn't the time." "Oh, it's exactly the time," Raymond shot back, cutting her off. He walked back to his end of the table and picked up another folder. "And here's a little something for you, Grace. Consider it an early Christmas gift." He tossed the folder onto the table in front of her. Grace's hands shook as she opened it. The first page was a copy of the DNA results. Her face went white. "Raymond," she began, her voice trembling. "You didn't—" "Oh, I did," he said, his voice laced with venom. "I had to know. And guess what? Not a single one of them is mine. Not one." The silence was deafening. Grace's mother clutched her chest, her face a mask of shock. The kids, sitting at a smaller table nearby, glanced over, sensing the shift in the room's energy. Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I can explain," she whispered, reaching for him. "Explain?" Raymond barked a bitter laugh. What could you possibly say to explain years of lies? Years of betrayal? Go on, Grace, I'm listening. Martin tried to interject. Raymond, this isn't. Don't you dare speak, Raymond snapped, rounding on him. You're a pathetic excuse for a man, preying on someone else's wife while pretending to be my friend. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could just walk into my home, sit at my table, and keep smiling like nothing's wrong? Martin's confidence crumbled. He stood abruptly. I should go. Oh, you're not going anywhere, Raymond said, stepping in front of him. Not until you see what happens when you mess with someone's life. Raymond turned to Grace, who was openly sobbing now. You stole from me, Grace. You funneled money into a hidden account for years. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Her sobs grew louder. I'm sorry, Raymond. Please, we can fix this. There's no fixing this, Raymond said coldly. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed this entire family. Your parents, the kids, everyone. He turned to the rest of the room. I want all of you to know what kind of person Grace really is. The lies she's told, the money she's stolen, and the life she's been living behind my back. Grace's father stood, his face red with anger. Is this true, Grace? Did you do all of this? She tried to speak but could only nod, her words lost in her sobs. Raymond looked at the family one last time. I've already filed for divorce. The papers will be served next week. And don't worry, Grace won't be left destitute. I've made sure she has exactly what she deserves. With that, he walked toward the door. The room was silent except for Grace's cries. As he reached for his coat, he turned back. Merry Christmas, everyone, he said, his voice dripping with irony. Enjoy the dinner. He left the house, the cold winter air hitting his face as he stepped outside. For the first time in months, he felt free. Raymond didn't look back. He walked to his car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the chaos of the dinner behind him. The scene following Christmas dinner was a hurricane of emotions. Grace was a wreck, her face streaked with tears as she clutched the edge of the dining table, begging Raymond not to leave. The guests, once brimming with holiday cheer, were stunned into silence. Some tried to step in. Others awkwardly excused themselves, leaving the wreckage of the night behind. Please, Raymond, Grace sobbed, her voice raw. You're angry, I get it, but we can fix this. I'll do anything. Don't throw away everything we've built. Raymond stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, his face an impenetrable mask of fury. What we've built, he said, his voice low and sharp. You mean what I built while you tore down behind my back? Grace flinched at his words, but she wasn't ready to give up. I love you. I always have. It was a mistake, Raymond. A stupid, horrible mistake. Raymond's laugh was hollow. Mistake? Don't insult me, Grace. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was calculated. You lied, you cheated, and you stole from me. That's not love. That's a betrayal so deep it's beyond forgiveness. As Grace crumbled into sobs, Martin, who had been frozen in place, decided to interject. He raised his hands as if surrendering. Look, Raymond, let's not blow this out of proportion. We're adults here. We can talk this through and come to an understanding. Raymond turned his piercing gaze to Martin, his smirk dripping with disdain. An understanding? Martin, you slept with my wife, humiliated me, and thought I wouldn't notice. What kind of understanding could we possibly have? Martin stepped forward, his tone shifting to smooth confidence. Look, I know I screwed up, okay? But this doesn't have to get ugly. You're successful, Raymond. You have everything, your job, your reputation. Let's just agree to move on without making this messy. Raymond took a deliberate step toward Martin, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. Messy? Oh, Martin, you don't understand. I've already taken steps to ensure this is as messy as it gets for you. Martin's confident facade cracked. What are you talking about? Your company, Raymond said, a dangerous edge to his tone. You know, the one where you climb the ladder by stepping on others? I have the receipts, Martin. The shady deals, the questionable ethics. Let's just say your board of directors is going to be very interested in what I've uncovered. Panic flashed across Martin's face. You're bluffing. Raymond leaned in, his voice a whisper that cut through the room. Am I? Check your inbox when you get home. I've already sent the evidence. As Martin stumbled back, his composure unraveling, Grace fell to her knees. "Raymond, please," she cried, clutching his hand. "Don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll make it right. Just don't leave me. Don't ruin this family." Raymond pulled his hand away, his expression icy. "You already ruined it, Grace. The family you're talking about? You broke at the moment you decided my love and trust weren't enough for you. But the kids," she sobbed. "They need you, Raymond. They need their father." Raymond's jaw tightened. "They will always have me. But you? You're nothing to me now." Grace tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She clung to the table for support, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't take them away from me." Raymond's eyes softened for a brief moment. "I won't take them away from you, Grace. But I will make sure they know the truth. All of it. They deserve to know who their mother really is." Grace's parents, who had been silent spectators, finally spoke up. Her mother, tears streaming down her face, approached Raymond. "Please, Raymond, think about the children. Think about the family." Raymond's face remained impassive. "Your daughter didn't think about that when she betrayed me. She made her choices. Now she'll face the consequences." Her father, red-faced and angry, pointed a trembling finger at Grace. "How could you do this, Grace? To your husband? To your children? What kind of mother?" "Dad, stop." Grace shrieked, covering her ears. "I know I messed up, okay? I don't need you to pile on." Raymond turned to her father, his tone measured but firm. "No, let him speak. She should hear it. Maybe it'll make her understand the gravity of what she's done." In the midst of the chaos, the children, who had been sent to their rooms, peeked from the top of the staircase. The oldest, a teenager, walked down cautiously. "Dad? Mom? What's going on?" Grace's head shot up, her face a mask of panic. "Go back upstairs," she shouted. Raymond held up a hand to stop her. "No, let them stay." The teenager frowned, looking between his parents. "What's happening?" Raymond knelt down, his voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry you have to see this, but it's time you know the truth. Your mother has been lying to me, and to all of us." Grace scrambled to her feet, her voice desperate. Don't drag them into this." "They deserve to know," Raymond said, his eyes locked on hers. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They're old enough to understand." The teenager's face hardened. "What did you do, Mom?" Grace broke down, unable to answer. Raymond straightened, looking at Grace one last time. "This is over. The divorce papers will be on your desk tomorrow. And don't think for a second I won't protect myself and the kids. Every dirty secret, every lie, it's all documented. I've already spoken to my lawyer." Grace's sobs filled the room as Raymond turned to Martin. "You should leave. Now." Martin hesitated, glancing at Grace, but Raymond's glare made it clear there was no room for negotiation. He grabbed his coat and left without another word. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Grace's cries. Raymond walked past her, stopping at the stairs to address the children. "I love you, and I always will. This doesn't change that. But things are going to be different from now on." When morning came, the house was eerily quiet. Grace sat at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from crying. The kids avoided her, sticking close to Raymond, who made breakfast with a calm efficiency. Grace tried to speak to him, but he ignored her, focusing on the children. "What do you guys want to do today?" he asked, his voice warm. The youngest tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go to the park?" "Of course," Raymond said with a smile. "Get your coats." As the kids ran off to get ready, Grace reached for his arm. "Raymond, please. Just listen to me." He pulled his arm away. "There's nothing left to say, Grace." He left with the kids, leaving her alone in the empty house, the weight of her choices crashing down on her. 11 years had passed since that fateful Christmas dinner. For Raymond, the years had been both grueling and transformative. His life was unrecognizable now, not because of what had been taken from him, but because of what he'd rebuilt. The man who had once been blindsided by betrayal now stood at the helm of one of the most successful corporations in the country. He had bought out Martin's failing company a few years after the scandal, gutting it and repurposing it into a powerhouse under his own brand. It was poetic justice. Raymond's personal life had flourished as well. He'd found love again, this time with someone who saw him for who he truly was and valued him in ways Grace never had. His new wife, Claire, was sitting at the front of the audience today, smiling warmly, her presence a quiet reminder of how far he had come. The stage was set for his most significant announcement yet, a merger that would make his company one of the largest in the industry. Cameras flashed as Raymond stepped up to the podium, his tailored suit and confident stance projecting an aura of dominance. The room buzzed with anticipation. Raymond adjusted the microphone, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Executives, journalists, and investors sat with rapt attention. But his eyes lingered for a moment on two familiar faces in the back of the room. Grace and Martin. They were barely recognizable. Martin's once confident swagger had been replaced by a defeated slouch. His expensive suits had been traded for ill-fitted ones that looked years out of fashion. Grace, too, had changed. The years of financial ruin and social ostracism had taken their toll, and the woman who had once exuded an air of superiority now looked worn and tired. Raymond allowed himself the faintest smirk before beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. What we are announcing is more than a business merger. It's a declaration of what is possible when resilience meets opportunity. The audience erupted into applause, but Raymond barely paused. His voice carried the weight of authority. When I started this journey, there were those who doubted me, who thought I didn't have what it takes to succeed. They underestimated me. They betrayed me. His eyes flicked back to Grace and Martin, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The air in the room grew charged, as though everyone could feel that Raymond was speaking to someone specific. But here I stand, Raymond continued, his tone sharpening. Not just standing, but thriving. And this, he gestured to the slide on the screen behind him, detailing the merger, is only the beginning. The applause was deafening. Cameras clicked furiously. Claire beamed proudly from the front row. As the crowd stood to give a standing ovation, Grace sat frozen, her hands clenched tightly around the cheap handbag in her lap. Martin leaned toward her, whispering harshly, "We shouldn't have come. This was a mistake." Grace shook her head, her voice trembling. "I needed to see for myself. I needed to know if he what? Rubbed it in our faces." Martin spat bitterly, sinking back into his chair. Well, mission accomplished. The years hadn't been kind to either of them. After the scandal, Martin had been ousted from his position, his reputation in shambles. Their attempts to start fresh had failed miserably, and the financial strain of lawsuits and bad investments had drained them completely. But for Grace, the worst part wasn't the money or even the social exile. It was the knowledge that Raymond had moved on, stronger and happier than ever, while she was stuck in the ruins of her own choices. After the presentation, there was a networking session in the Grand Hall. Raymond mingled with ease, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, and answering questions from journalists. Grace and Martin lingered awkwardly near the back, unsure whether to approach. Finally, Grace gathered the courage to walk up to him. Martin stayed behind, muttering, "This won't end well." "Raymond," Grace said hesitantly, her voice wavering. Raymond turned, his expression unreadable. "Grace," he replied, his tone even, though his eyes carried a flicker of something colder. She looked at him, searching for any trace of the man she once knew. But all she saw was someone she barely recognized, confident, unyielding, untouchable. "You've done well," she said softly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I have," Raymond replied curtly. Grace took a deep breath. I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I know it's too late, but I needed to say it." Raymond studied her for a moment, then nodded. "It is too late, but I appreciate the apology." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "Do you ever think about what we had?" Raymond's jaw tightened. He glanced toward Claire, who was laughing with a group of executives. "What we had," he repeated. "No, Grace. I think about what I have now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." The words hit her like a blow, but she forced a smile. "I'm glad you're happy." Raymond nodded. "I am, and I hope you found some kind of peace." Grace hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I haven't, but I'm trying." Raymond's expression softened for a brief moment. "Good luck, Grace," he said simply before turning away. As Grace watched him walk back to Claire, the weight of her choices pressed down on her like never before. She returned to Martin, who was slumped in a chair, scrolling through his phone. "Well?" Martin asked without looking up. Grace shook her head, her voice hollow. "Let's just go." They left quietly, slipping out the back door like shadows fading into the night. Back in the hall, Raymond stood with Claire, his arm around her waist. "That went well," Claire said with a smile, leaning into him. Raymond glanced at the empty spot where Grace and Martin had been sitting. "It did," he replied, his voice steady. As they left the building, stepping into the crisp evening air, Claire turned to him. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" Raymond paused, then shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I'm thinking about us. About what's next." She smiled, taking his hand. "Then let's go home." And as they walked to their car, the past finally felt like a distant memory, replaced by a future full of promise.